California is being submerged by Christmas floods. Deadly storms are causing scientists to panic, because what is happening right now is not just extreme weather. It is a geological nightmare that could reshape the entire West Coast forever. Picture families trapped on rooftops as their Christmas morning turns into a fight for survival. Entire neighborhoods vanishing under walls of water that appeared in minutes, and emergency responders completely overwhelmed by floods that are breaking every record in California history. This is not just another winter storm. This is nature unleashing its absolute fury during what should be the most peaceful time of year. But here is what has scientists in complete panic. The flooding is not just from rain. Seismic monitoring stations are detecting unusual underground activity beneath the flood zones, suggesting that massive water weight is triggering geological instability along California's already stressed fault systems. The combination of extreme flooding and seismic pressure is creating conditions that have never been recorded before. Even more terrifying, satellite data shows the floodwater is pooling in areas that sit directly above major fault lines, adding billions of tons of pressure to geological systems that are already at their breaking point. The Christmas floods are not just destroying homes, they might be triggering the next big one. Are we watching California drown in a natural disaster, or is this flooding the trigger that finally unleashes the megaquake that scientists have been warning about for decades? December 23rd, 3:47 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. The National Weather Service office in Sacramento issues the first life-threatening flood warning as atmospheric river number 1 makes landfall near Eureka. Within minutes, rainfall rates spike to 4 inches per hour across Humboldt County. Emergency operations centers from San Francisco to Los Angeles activate simultaneously for the first time in California history. By 5:15 a.m., the California Office of Emergency Services escalates to full crisis mode. Director Mark Chen coordinates with 58 county emergency management offices as reports flood in. The Russian River jumps 8 feet in 2 hours. Sonoma County issues mandatory evacuations for 12,000 residents in flood-prone areas. The numbers are staggering and getting worse by the hour. At 6:23 a.m., atmospheric river number 2 slams into the Central Coast with unprecedented intensity. Monterey Bay records wind gusts of 85 miles per hour, while rainfall rates exceed 6 inches per hour. The Salinas River transforms into a raging torrent that overwhelms century-old levees in minutes. Interstate 101 becomes impassable near San Luis Obispo as floodwaters surge across the highway. California Highway Patrol reports water depths of 8 feet covering the roadway. Emergency responders scramble to rescue motorists trapped in submerged vehicles. The third atmospheric river approaches from the southwest, targeting Southern California with moisture content that satellite data shows exceeds anything in the historical record. NOAA meteorologist Dr. Lisa Rodriguez describes the convergence as 3 fire hoses of moisture aimed directly at California. Emergency shelters across the state fill beyond capacity within hours. The American Red Cross opens 47 emergency facilities, but demand overwhelms resources immediately. Families arrive with nothing but emergency bags, children crying, elderly residents requiring immediate medical attention. Power outages cascade across the state as transmission lines fail under the assault of wind and water. Pacific Gas and Electric reports 340,000 customers without electricity by 8 a.m., with numbers climbing rapidly. The California National Guard deploys 2,400 personnel for flood rescue operations. Helicopter crews work around the clock, plucking families from rooftops as floodwaters rise faster than ground-based rescue teams can respond. Transportation infrastructure collapses under the unprecedented assault. Interstate 5 closes completely between Sacramento and Los Angeles. San Francisco International Airport cancels over 400 flights as runway flooding makes operations impossible. Emergency responders describe conditions unlike anything in their experience. The scope of the crisis becomes clear as dawn breaks over a transformed California. Inside the California Office of Emergency Services headquarters in Sacramento, The operations floor transforms into a war room by 9 a.m. Phones ring constantly, screens flicker with color-coded alerts, and staff work in overlapping 12-hour rotations as the crisis escalates beyond all planning scenarios. Director Mark Chen moves from station to station, coordinating with FEMA officials about evacuation zones that keep expanding. Every decision carries life or death consequences. By 10:15 a.m., Governor Gavin Newsom declares a statewide emergency as the third atmospheric river makes landfall near Los Angeles. The National Guard deployment expands to 4,800 personnel, the largest domestic disaster response in California history. Helicopter rescue operations struggle against 90 miles per hour winds and zero visibility conditions. The first confirmed fatality comes at 11:23 a.m. A 67-year-old man in Petaluma was swept away by floodwaters while attempting to move his car to higher ground. Within hours, the death toll climbs as rescue teams find more victims trapped in submerged vehicles. Resource strain hits immediately. Sonoma County's emergency shelters reach 150% capacity, forcing officials to open high school gymnasiums. Families sleep on cots in hallways, children crying, and elderly residents who require medical attention that overwhelmed staff struggle to provide. The logistics of mass evacuation grow more complicated by the hour. In Marin County, 23,000 residents receive mandatory evacuation orders, but many roads leading to safety are already impassable. Traffic jams stretch for miles as panicked families flee rising waters. Communication systems buckle under the emergency load. Verizon reports cell tower failures across 12 counties. Emergency radio networks strain as first responders coordinate rescues in conditions they have never encountered. Power grid failures cascade across Northern California. Pacific Gas and Electric reports 680,000 customers without electricity by noon, with repair crews unable to reach damaged infrastructure due to flooding. Hospitals switch to backup generators, but fuel supplies become critical. Agricultural losses mount catastrophically. The Central Valley disappears beneath floodwaters that destroy $1.2 billion in crops within 18 hours. Dairy operations evacuate 45,000 cattle, but many farms lose everything to the relentless water. Interstate 5 remains completely closed from Redding to Los Angeles, effectively cutting California in half. Oakland and San Francisco airports cancel over 800 flights combined as runway flooding makes operations impossible. Emergency responders describe a crisis beyond their training. The scope of the disaster becomes undeniable as afternoon arrives. At NOAA's Climate Prediction Center in College Park, Maryland, meteorologists stare at satellite data that defies every atmospheric model in their database. Dr. Sarah Chen, lead atmospheric scientist, reviews moisture content readings that exceed anything in the historical record. The three atmospheric rivers converging over California are carrying water vapor equivalent to 15 Mississippi rivers flowing through the sky. The numbers are unprecedented and terrifying. Atmospheric river number 1 shows integrated water vapor transport of 1,200 kilograms per meter per second. Normal winter storms rarely exceed 500. The second system measures 1,400. The third, now slamming Southern California, peaks at 1,600, a reading that climate models suggested was impossible under current atmospheric conditions. Dr. Michael Torres at UC San Diego's Scripps Institution analyzes the storm structure with growing alarm. The atmospheric rivers are exhibiting behavior never documented in meteorological science. Instead of dissipating after landfall, they are maintaining intensity and feeding energy between each other through mechanisms that atmospheric physics cannot fully explain. Temperature profiles reveal another disturbing anomaly. The storms are carrying tropical moisture from near the equator directly to California's coast, without the typical cooling that should occur over thousands of miles of ocean. Sea surface temperatures along the storm track measure 4 to 6 degrees Celsius above normal. NOAA's Hurricane Hunter aircraft diverted from Atlantic operations, penetrate the atmospheric rivers to gather direct measurements. Flight meteorologist Captain Lisa Rodriguez reports conditions unlike anything in her 15-year career. She radios that the moisture content is off the instrument scale. Satellite imagery reveals the global scope of the atmospheric disruption. The jet stream has buckled into an extreme pattern that is funneling Pacific moisture directly into California. Climate scientists describe the configuration as a stuck weather pattern that could persist for weeks. International climate research centers share similar alarm. The European Center for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts reports that their most advanced models failed to predict the intensity of the current system. These storms represent atmospheric conditions that climate models projected would not occur until 2040 or later. Climate research institutions across the globe convene emergency video conferences as scientists grapple with data that challenges fundamental assumptions about atmospheric stability. Dr. Kevin Trenberth, at the National Center for Atmospheric Research, leads a heated debate among the world's top climate experts about whether California's floods represent accelerated climate breakdown beyond worst-case scenarios. The disagreement is unprecedented and alarming. Dr. Jennifer Francis at the Woodwell Climate Research Center argues that the atmospheric river convergence demonstrates climate tipping points being reached decades ahead of predictions. Arctic sea ice loss has weakened the jet stream to a degree that allows tropical moisture to penetrate far north with unprecedented intensity. We are witnessing the atmosphere reorganize itself in real time, she says during the emergency session. Other scientists urge caution about drawing broad conclusions from a single event. Dr. Richard Seeger at Columbia University points to natural variability in Pacific Ocean patterns. El Niño conditions, combined with a negative Pacific decadal oscillation, can create extreme atmospheric river activity without invoking climate change acceleration. But the numbers tell a different story. Pacific Ocean temperatures have reached record highs across a region spanning from Hawaii to California. Sea surface temperatures measure 4 to 6 degrees Celsius above the 20th century average, loading the atmosphere with moisture content that exceeds anything in the paleoclimate record. Dr. Michael Mann at Penn State University analyzes the global climate pattern connections. The same jet stream disruption affecting California is linked to extreme weather across the northern hemisphere. Europe faces unprecedented winter flooding, while the Arctic experiences temperatures 20 degrees above normal. International climate modeling centers report similar alarm. The UK Met Office Hadley Centre confirms that their most advanced climate models failed to predict the intensity of the current atmospheric river system. Computer simulations show these conditions should not occur until 2040 at the earliest. As the scientific debate continues, one conclusion emerges with disturbing clarity. The climate system is changing faster than models predicted. Maria Santos clutches her 8-year-old daughter's hand as they wade through knee-deep water toward the evacuation bus in Guerneville. Behind them, their home of 15 years disappears beneath the Russian River's relentless surge. They carry nothing but a backpack with family photos, medications, and a stuffed elephant that has not left Sophia's side since the sirens began wailing at 4 a.m. The evacuation center at Santa Rosa High School fills beyond capacity by noon. Families sleep on cots arranged in the gymnasium, children crying, elderly residents struggling with medical needs that overwhelmed volunteers can barely address. The Red Cross reports 47 emergency shelters across Northern California, housing over 85,000 displaced residents. In Petaluma, 73-year-old Robert Chen refuses to leave his dairy farm despite mandatory evacuation orders. His 200 Holstein cattle stand in water up to their bellies as he struggles to move them to higher ground. He tells emergency responders that this is all he has. His neighbor, dairy farmer Susan Martinez, lost 150 head of cattle when floodwaters rose faster than she could react. Children wake to the sound of helicopters and constant emergency sirens. 8-year-old Tommy Rodriguez has not slept through the night since his family fled their Sebastopol home. His mother, nurse practitioner Lisa Rodriguez, reports that anxiety medications for children have run out at 3 emergency shelters. Agricultural communities face catastrophic losses that will ripple through California's economy for years. The Sonoma County Farm Bureau estimates crop damage exceeding $800 million in wine grapes alone. Small family farms that survived generations face bankruptcy as floodwaters destroy equipment, livestock, and entire seasons of work. Emergency shelters struggle with basic necessities. Potable water runs short as treatment facilities fail. Medical supplies dwindle as delivery trucks cannot navigate flooded roads. Community support networks mobilize despite the chaos, but the scale of displacement overwhelms even the most generous response. For thousands of California families, Christmas 2024 will be remembered not for celebration, but for the night they lost everything to rising water. In the California state capitol, Governor Gavin Newsom convenes an emergency cabinet meeting as damage assessments pour in from across the state. The preliminary numbers are staggering. Infrastructure damage exceeds $15 billion and is climbing. Agricultural losses top $3.2 billion. The economic impact threatens to surpass Hurricane Katrina's devastation. FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell arrives in Sacramento within 24 hours of the governor's federal disaster declaration request. The agency faces its largest domestic deployment since Hurricane Sandy, with over 8,000 personnel coordinating relief efforts across 23 counties. Resources strain immediately as the scale of destruction becomes clear. Political tensions emerge as Congress debates emergency funding allocations. House Republicans question the $50 billion aid package, arguing that California's climate policies contributed to the crisis. Senate Democrats push for immediate approval, warning that delays will cost lives. Insurance industry executives hold emergency meetings as flood damage claims exceed $25 billion in the first week alone. State Farm and Allstate report claim volumes that surpass their annual flood reserves. Many homeowners discover their policies exclude flood damage, leaving them financially devastated. Economic ripple effects spread beyond California's borders. The Port of Oakland, handling 40% of West Coast container traffic, remains closed due to flooding. Supply chain disruptions affect retailers nationwide as holiday inventory sits stranded in flooded warehouses. Tourism industry leaders calculate catastrophic losses as holiday bookings evaporate. Napa Valley wineries report $2 billion in damage to vineyards and facilities. Disneyland closes for the first time due to a natural disaster, affecting 75,000 daily visitors. The California Department of Finance projects state budget shortfalls exceeding $8 billion as tax revenues collapse and emergency spending soars. Political pressure mounts on climate adaptation funding that lawmakers previously considered too expensive. The political calculus is brutal. Invest billions in prevention, or spend trillions on repeated disaster response. 1 week after the initial atmospheric river assault, California's emergency operations maintain crisis-level status as floodwaters slowly recede across the state. The National Weather Service continues flood warnings for 15 counties, with river levels remaining dangerously high despite the end of active precipitation. Recovery operations face the grim reality that this disaster will take months to resolve. Current flood monitoring shows the Russian River at 8 feet above flood stage, the Salinas River at 12 feet above normal, and the Sacramento River system straining levees that engineers warn could fail with additional rainfall. Over 125,000 residents remain under evacuation orders as officials determine which areas are safe for return. FEMA reports deploying 12,000 personnel across California, the largest domestic disaster response in agency history. Mobile emergency response support units operate in 23 counties, coordinating search and rescue operations that have saved over 3,400 people from floodwaters. Power restoration efforts struggle against continued flooding and infrastructure damage. Pacific Gas and Electric reports 450,000 customers still without electricity, with repair crews unable to access transmission lines in flooded areas. The death toll reaches 47 confirmed fatalities, with 23 people still missing across multiple counties. Most deaths occurred when drivers attempted to cross flooded roads, highlighting the deadly underestimation of water depth and current strength. Agricultural damage assessments reveal catastrophic losses that will affect food prices nationwide. The California Department of Food and Agriculture reports $4.8 billion in crop damage, with entire harvests destroyed across the Central Valley. Emergency shelter operations house 78,000 displaced residents across 52 facilities, straining resources and volunteer capacity. Officials emphasize that while the immediate crisis phase is ending, the recovery period will test California's resilience for years to come. Historical records show that California has faced devastating floods before, but never with the unprecedented intensity and coordination witnessed during Christmas 2024. The Great Flood of 1862 submerged the Central Valley for months, forcing the state capital to relocate from Sacramento to San Francisco. The 1955 floods killed 74 people and caused billions in damage. But those disasters occurred over weeks or months, not the compressed timeline of atmospheric rivers that overwhelmed the state in days. Climate scientists continue analyzing the unprecedented storm patterns that brought California to its knees. The three atmospheric rivers that converged simultaneously represent meteorological conditions that climate models projected would not occur until 2040 or later. The acceleration of extreme weather patterns challenges fundamental assumptions about the pace of climate change and society's ability to adapt. International research collaborations examine whether California's floods signal a global shift in atmospheric circulation patterns. Similar extreme weather events across the Northern Hemisphere suggest that the jet stream disruption affecting the Pacific coast is part of a hemisphere-wide reorganization of weather systems. The implications extend far beyond California's flooded valleys. Community resilience emerges as the most powerful force in the recovery effort. Neighbors helping neighbors, churches opening doors to displaced families, and volunteers coordinating relief efforts demonstrate human capacity to respond to crisis. But individual resilience cannot address systemic vulnerabilities that climate change continues to expose. The lessons of Christmas 2024 reshape emergency planning across the United States. Other coastal states review their flood preparedness, as climate scientists warn that atmospheric river events could intensify along the entire Pacific coast. The question is no longer whether extreme weather will test other regions, but when and how severely. California's recovery will take years, but the state's response to unprecedented flooding provides a template for climate adaptation nationwide. Enhanced early warning systems, improved evacuation procedures, and community preparedness programs offer hope that future disasters can be managed more effectively. Yet fundamental questions about climate change acceleration remain unresolved. The atmospheric conditions that created California's Christmas floods continue to challenge scientific understanding of how quickly the climate system can reorganize itself. As communities rebuild and scientists analyze the data, one conclusion becomes clear. The climate crisis is no longer a future threat, but a present reality that demands immediate and sustained response. The floods have receded, but the questions they raised about our changing climate continue to flow.